Pro boxing fans, we are here in London. Dan Hardy, KSI doesn't disappoint for the YouTubers. Look, we see him and Dillon Danis facing off. He hit him with a pancake.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I mean, I didn't see it coming, if I'm honest. To be honest, the whole thing seemed a little bit kind of subdued. It was almost like Dillon Danis was so nonchalant that KSI needed to do something to aggravate him, you know what I mean, and raise the stakes. The fact that it was a whole pancake, though, and he went to the trouble of making it, that's way more organised than the Benn Eubank situation.
Talk to me about Dillon Danis, first of all. Obviously, you come from the MMA world, and I want to ask you, for people that don't know, what sort of name does Dillon Danis have in that world, if any? Because a lot of people know him associated with Conor McGregor, but what can you tell us about Dillon Danis?
You know, there was a point where everyone was paying attention to Dillon Danis because he was a world champion grappler. He'd made his professional debut, was undefeated, 2 submissions, and I think everyone was really excited about him. And then he linked up with Conor, and people are thinking, right, you've got a world-class grappler, a world-class striker. These two are going to make a great team. And it almost feels like they're a bit derailed each other. You know what I mean? Like Conor was being swept along by his fame, and Dillon just loves the attention and the fame. So it was almost like he prioritized the attention that he was getting with the success of his career. I honestly would love to see him go back to legitimate mixed martial arts competition because he's a very, very good grappler. But obviously, the area where he's weak is what he's having to use against KSI, which puts him at a real disadvantage.
Yeah, that was the question I was going to ask you. For a fighter who's actually come from fighting background in Dillon Danis, when you pair him up with KSI, who's only started boxing a couple of years ago, and he has taken it very seriously. It's not just a hobby, but how is it that when it comes to boxing, that they're quite close when it comes to boxing? A lot of people can't pick either or.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, like, KSI trains at London Shoot Fighters. Alexis and the team there have been putting people through their paces for, 3 decades now, you know? Like, so they know how to prepare people, and anyone that walks into their gym, they're not going to associate their name and their gym name with someone, whoever it is, if they're not going to put the work in. So I've seen KSI on that Versa climber. That thing's an absolute murderer, that horrible machine. It's rusted and it's filthy, and he goes through the same workouts that all the young amateurs and pros do. So I know he's going to be ready, and you can also see that change in his style from the early Logan Paul fight to the more later fights where he's got that MVP in and out karate style bounce, which again is really useful for someone like Dillon Danis. But ultimately, what's Danis going to do is he's going to try and maul him. He's going to try and get his hands on him and hold on to him as much as possible. So that's why I feel like KSI has been working on a few other things. If I was him, I'd be working on those body shots, try and soften him up a little bit.
I do want to talk to you about another fighter who's going to be on this card. Didn't turn up today, in Darren Till. Obviously, we know of him as someone from the UFC. Unfortunately, it didn't really go to the way that a lot of people expected him. They expected him to become a champion. It didn't happen. What do you make of Darren Till in this form of the sport?
I mean, this kind of thing suits Darren Till really well because he's very aggressive, he's very outspoken. I mean, we saw with the John Fury situation at the face-off, Darren Till just takes over, no matter where he goes. When he fought Masvidal, I did the face-off for that, he takes over. The press conference, he just takes over. But he does it out of this very organic self-belief that he knows he can legitimately fight, and he can. And Darren Stute can as well. And honestly, I think this is going to be... There's no animosity, no anger between the two, but they're going to come and try and murder each other. It's like so different to the main event where there's like loads of trash talking, then not much skill when they come together. Then you've got not really much trash talking between these two guys because of the respect, but the skill level is going to be evident.
Interesting. Actually, you mentioned MVP there. I do want to talk about him and his great performance against Sharabulli. First of all, what did you make of that? Secondly, there's a lot of noise, and we're Brits. We want to see the big clash in Britain with Leon Edwards. What do you make of all this going on from MVP? And hopefully, at some point, there's this big clash with Leon Edwards.
Look, I think as far as a domestic fight goes, I can't think we've ever had a bigger one in MMA. And the fact that they obviously MVP was such a star in Bellator, and he had such devastating knockouts. I mean, literally caving someone's skull in. Like, that's not even hyperbole. But he was outside of the UFC, and everyone's watching Leon and all the other guys rise to the top of the sport. And I know full well that MVP, even at this stage of his career, he wants that moment where he can show people that he is the elite level British fighter. And honestly, him versus Leon would just be... I mean, I've got goosebumps thinking about it. That's a sold-out O2 arena at least.
So exactly. I had goosebumps just talking about it. Two boxing questions before I let you go. Eubank Benn's done all the rounds this week. I was there covering the London press conference. I saw what happened in Manchester. Listen, it seems to have brought a lot more eyes to the fight. What did you make of that week and the press conferences between the two guys?
I thought it was interesting. Look, I mean, the tension between the two is always going to be evident. But just like we saw here with KSI, like that was premeditated, pocket full of eggs. You know what I mean? Like there's a plan going on there, and I would expect that from Eubank. I wouldn't expect that from Benn. Just like you wouldn't expect it from Nigel Benn. You wouldn't expect it from Conor Benn because they are laser focused. There's no circus around it. There's nothing on the periphery. It's about putting fist to face when it comes to the Benns, and that's why I love both of them. But then on the other side, the Eubanks are so outlandish, and you can see that Chris Eubank Jr. is very much a part of his father's DNA, like stealing the show, like the kind of confident bravado that he's got. It's not exactly the same as his dad, but you know, and to see these two guys come together, Conor Benn, a slightly more controlled, calculated version of his dad, and Chris Eubank Jr., a slightly more subdued version of his father, but the rivalry of these two coming together is fantastic. I just wish they were closer to weight, so that's not a topic of conversation, you know.
I do want to get into your fighter's head, because obviously you were a fighter before you put on a suit and decided to become a pundit and a commentator, but in that second press conference, Chris Eubank Jr. addressed Nigel Benn and said to him, listen, I know you grabbed me the first time, if that ever happens again, you won't get your hand back. Online, that seems to have picked up a lot of traction. A lot of people saying, look, that's a legend of the sport. But you're a fighter. Someone does grab you by the neck. Do you understand from Chris's point of view on what was said?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you know, like, yes, it is a sport, and yes, we are athletes, but like, these guys are fighters, first and foremost. And as much as we can remove it from war, these are warlike individuals. These are warriors, right? And for as sporting as the context is, it is very much life or death for a lot of these guys. You know, they everything hangs on this next matchup. Everything hangs on the defeating of this person that's standing in front of me. And with the legacy that follows these two guys into this ring that's not even belonging to those two guys, the weight that they must carry, it must feel like life and death. I can't even begin to imagine. And then obviously the relationship with the two fathers, like Nigel Benn is just go for it. I'm in your corner all the time. And then the struggle of dealing with your dad, like talking down about you and, oh, you know, he shouldn't be fighting this weight, and he was a good boxer. He's still a pretty good boxer, and like that must be another thing for Eubank to carry into the ring as well. It's a fascinating situation, really is.
Final one before I let you go. I was in Riyadh last week or the week before for the big card, boxing big card. In that, Daniel Dubois pulled out. But I need your thoughts, because you know all the sports, right? I need your thoughts. Daniel Dubois versus Oleksandr Usyk is the talk of the town right now. It seems like talks are going to happen, and maybe in October we get to see that fight. What happens second time around, because they've already faced each other first time? What happens in the second fight?
I just think for me, and I may be underestimating him, but for me, Usyk, there's just so much going on in his mind. He's just such a cerebral fighter, so well put together. I feel like he's going to be outthinking a lot of these fighters before the first bell even goes, and I would always give him that advantage. And you know, Dubois has got very, very good fundamentals. He's got great power in his hands. He's great at bringing his feet in underneath him when he's throwing his punches, but the level that Usyk operates on from a fight IQ standard is just different. I'd love to pick his brain. He seems fascinating to me.
Hopefully you get to do that with whoever you work with, DAZN, or someone else puts you in that same room with Usyk. That might be the one, man. But Dan, listen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're a legend in your own right, you know, in the sport. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Top man.